Hey guys, what is happening? Welcome to Your Forest. And coming at you tired, sunburnt, and mildly dehydrated, actually. Coming off a weekend of shingling my roof with my old man. And surprisingly enough, I managed to convince him to get on the podcast today. So he's been in forestry for, what did he say, since 76 or something like that. So a long time. He just recently retired. So he was a senior level forester for West Fraser out of Slave Lake for a long time. A few decades, actually. And he was a part of a number of different committees. I won't name them all, but a bunch of different stuff, growth and yield stuff, biodiversity stuff. He was on a bunch of different boards and committees, all that kind of stuff. He's also one of the original team members making the new regeneration standards for Alberta regarding growing back cut blocks after they've been cut, after they've been harvested. And that was a huge change for Alberta, and we'll get into that a lot more. He's got a lot of great experience regarding policy and how things have changed to become more scientific and better over time. So, it was a really awesome conversation. I wasn't really sure where we were going to go with it. I kind of figured we'd just talk about how he got into forestry, where his inspiration comes from. He knows so much that he started talking about how forestry and natural resource management has developed over time, and how it started off as more of a just harvesting approach and trying to get the resources off the land base, and how it's moved into a scientific approach of sustainable forest management and bringing back the trees and making sure that it's sustainable over time, and bringing in biodiversity metrics and all kinds of different values, and making sure that everything is as close to natural as we can possibly get it. We talked a lot about where things were, and then we moved into where things he think might end up being, how it's become more scientific and all of that. All kinds of weird little anecdotes and stories, and just touched on a lot of different stuff. It was really, really good. Models versus the real world, how you have to get on the ground and really see and understand what's going on, how you have to enjoy your work, really enjoy it, not just feel you have to be producing nonstop all the time. How foresters in the past were more of jack of all trades, right? They know how to do a little bit of everything, whereas now we're getting into a more very pigeonholed approach, is the way he said it, right? But more specialized, and I think that's a good thing in some ways and a bad thing in others. We talked about so many different things. I think you guys are really going to get a lot out of this. I know he's my dad, so I'm a bit biased, but also I think it was really, really good, and he's got a lot of knowledge to give, and I think a lot of people will get a lot out of it. So the conversation kind of started kind of funny. We were just sitting there shooting the bull for a little bit, and then all of a sudden he just started talking about silviculture. So it opens up just with him literally talking about silviculture. Silviculture is the science of growing back trees. So that's where we started. We were just shooting the bull, and he started talking. So I decided, we'll start the podcast there. So it just kind of started organically. So if you're a little bit confused about what's going on at the beginning, that's what it is. He's talking about the science of growing back trees. As far as sponsors for today, just the normal three again. Greenlink Forestry. They do resource inventory analysis. So basically they take the forest and they turn it into basically something that you can put into a model, so that forest managers can understand what is out there and they can start management properly. Also, another sponsor is the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta. They provide funding for me, and I can't be more thankful to them for allowing me to continue to do this. It's been great. And also Damaged Timber. Damaged Timber, you guys, if you listen to one of the past podcasts, had Tony Waranga on. He started it. He's the owner, I suppose. And it's an apparel company, and they are trying to support environmental sciences through the sale of their clothing. So they're taking 10% of their clothing, 10% of the money earned on their clothing, and putting it towards a scholarship for people going into environmental sciences. And that's going to be coming out in 2018. If you go to the website, not Your Forest, that's me. If you go to the website, damagedtimber.com, and on your checkout, you can type in Your Forest 10, you get 10% off, and that's on top of all the other sales that are going on or whatever. So really, really good stuff. Really good hats, good quality stuff. We're getting water bottles eventually, I think, and hoodies, all kinds of cool stuff. So check it out. Appreciate it. And without any further messing around, here is myself and my old man. Terry Kristoff.
Silviculture, when I started, which was planting trees, has grown leaps and bounds on the scientific and that end of it.
Oh, yeah.
Such that it has fostered responsible forest management as well.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I started planting trees, I was planting these poor little trees. They were grown at the provincial nursery, and it was great. They had nursery for the province supplying trees, but they weren't great trees because they didn't have the science yet. And as progressed, by 1990 and 95, when all the quota holders started having to plant trees, then all of a sudden it kicked it off, and we started getting worried about stock. We started worried about size of stock and health and viability of seedlings, and then we started getting results on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And those results. Then we said, well, we have to measure how well we're doing, and then it just kept growing. It was a growing thing, right?
What do you know? We should be systematic about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start? When were you tree planting? When did you start?
77.
77. So 70. So how did they? How big were the plugs that you were using? Or the seedlings?
Well, they were Spencer and Mayer. Are we going?
Yeah, I've been recording this whole time. I'll delete some of the stuff at the beginning where we were shooting the shit, but all of a sudden you started talking sense. We may as well record it.
When I started in 77, I was finishing off my bachelor's education degree at University of Regina, because in Saskatchewan you didn't have a lot of natural resource opportunities, and so I did my education degree. But my older sister, was a foreman at Simpson Timber in Whitecourt, outside Blue Ridge Whitecourt area. Yeah. And I needed a summer job. I had spent most of my summers before that working in Northern Ontario. So I was in the bush, right? Hunting, fishing, and doing all kinds of nice stuff, right? But in 77, she got me a job tree planting at Simpson Timber. Yeah. And so you spent a month to 6 weeks tree planting, and I was pretty good at it. And so they kept me on throughout the summer. And I went back to school in 77 and finished off in 78, came back and tree planted, and then just stayed on with Simpson Timber. Right.
So did you know anything about forestry before you started tree planting?
Not really.
Because you grew up in eastern Saskatchewan, where it's farm, and
we didn't have trees. Not a lot of trees. No, there wasn't a lot of trees. But I always hunted, and I fished, and I trapped, and I did all the things that you would think you should enjoy in the outdoors. Yeah. And then when I was in Northern Ontario all summer, I was on the lake in a canoe fishing all summer when I wasn't working, right? Yeah. I started working in Ontario when I was 15. Yeah. And so it was a natural transition for me to go from education degree, right, working in the bush, enjoying it, right? So after the summer of 78, I just went and I actually worked at Simpson Timber in the mill. So I was in the sawmill. I worked in the sawmill, and that would be the trend. I would work in the sawmill all winter. Yeah. And once spring hit, boom, off I would be into the bush with the guys doing silviculture mostly. Yeah. Doing tree planting supervision by then, and regen surveys.
So you were supervising tree planters before, so you were doing that as a non-forester, non-educated in forestry. Yeah. But you had your education.
Degrees. And to be truthful, I knew probably more about forestry than some foresters do. Well, I've been living and breathing it. I've been living and breathing it for 2 summers already, right? Yeah. So what happened when I think it was the Berlin berth was given up, was offered out.
Berlin berth?
Yeah, the Berlin timber berth, right? It was around like a Grand Cache and that, right? Okay. At that time, Simpson Timber had a bid in on it, and I was working in the sawmill in Fox Creek. Yeah. And I was running loader, doing log scaling and stuff like that. And they bid on this timber berth, right? And then right at the end,
berth being tenure,
tenure for like
you're allowed to go in and cut some
an FMA,
trees.
Right? Basically, right? And my thoughts were is that, well, if Simpson Timber got this bid, I would just stay with Simpson Timber without any forestry education, and I would just keep working with them for the rest of my life, right? And but right at the end, people at Burridge Lumber or Simpson Timber at the time said the timber's not there. It's not a good deal. Yeah. Right? And so they pulled their bid. Oh. And they did that in about November or December of 1979.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, I gotta do something in forestry, right? So I said, I'm going back to school.
Right.
So then in January 1980, I started back at U of A.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did about a 2.5 year after degree program, right? And got my BSc in forestry.
Yeah. And then you did,
well, when I went there, I was obviously a mature student already.
You were 30 when you, no, not 30. You were late 20s when you started.
24 when I finished. I finished in 82, so I was 26 when I finished.
Finish your master's?
No.
Finish your bachelor's of science in forestry.
But I found forestry really simple because I've been living it for 4 years.
Right.
And I did really well. So I ended up getting a lot of high-level scholarships to do my master's, right? So after a year with the Alberta Forestry Association, which was downtown Edmonton, I went back and I did my master's in timber management.
Yeah.
And finished that in 86.
Yeah. Well, I always wonder what it was like back then, though, in the late 70s doing forestry. It's got to be a totally different game than it is now.
It is totally, and I get a little upset with even you when you were out there, because when we were out there in forestry, we did hunt, we did fish, we did all the things that we enjoyed. We worked our butts off. We did the time. We put in 12, 14-hour days, whatever it did.
Yeah.
But we always had fishing hooks in our backpack. And if we found a stream that looked like had nice grayling or trout, we would stop for 20 minutes and we would do that, right? And even after I started working for Zeeler in Slave Lake, and in the fall, the rifle was always on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And it was given that
you get the
opportunity presented itself. You did what you had to do, and then you took the rest of the day off and took the meat home, right? But it's and I find now that young people are more tuned to, okay, we got to do this. It's got a time clock. We got to get it done, and they don't take the time to smell the flowers and enjoy what they're. I think a lot of them do.
Yeah,
but
you're not saying that necessarily everyone needs to have a rifle and go shoot everything. But you need to enjoy yourself while you're out there.
But you really have to enjoy what you're at, right?
Yeah.
And all the people I know who are in forestry as a profession, they're there because they love the forest. We're the first line environmentalists out there. Mm-hmm. They really are, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I see different. Maybe a little bit different now. I don't think some of the younger people enjoy as much. I know some guys go out and they enjoy it a lot. Yeah. Because they're the ones that are always sending me pictures when I'm sitting in the office. They're sending me pictures of coyotes and wolves and chickens and moose and deer. You know that they're enjoying their time out there, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, I think, I wonder what that is. If it's just my generation's idea of we got to be hustling, got to try to do well and move forward or whatever it is. But yeah, I definitely agree. There is a lot of that. We don't spend enough time. Even here at Green Lake, we spend a lot of time when we're out in the bush. We're trying to get things done, but also I find lately, I have to take more time to relax.
I think it's a lot of change in how people view jobs.
Yeah,
and when I started, we didn't worry about working alone.
Yeah,
we were expected to work alone. We were expected to know how to survive in the forest, right? Mm-hmm. So, but now you have all these regulations in place, and to even carry a gun with a company, you have to have written permission and all this stuff. Whereas in we'll call it the old days, not that far ago, but we just did what we had to do. We were jacks of all trades.
Yeah,
and maybe that's a little bit different too. Maybe a lot of the young people coming into forestry aren't jacks of all trades anymore. They're not farmers, right? I came from the farm, so I could weld, I could cut, I could do almost anything.
Yeah.
Not great at anything, but I could do a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah.
So you were expected, if your tires fell off your truck, well, you jack it up, you fix it, you put the tires back on, and you go home, right?
Yeah.
And we did that. You got stuck. Well, you didn't phone for a tow truck. And I find that happens lots. Better phone tow truck.
What tow truck goes into the middle of the bush on a muddy road?
They cost you a lot of money, but they do.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, you just figure out how to do it, right? And even now, to pull people out is dangerous. So we have rules and regulations, and we have standard operating procedures on how to pull somebody out. On those days, we didn't have standard operating procedures. And I'm not saying it was right, but but we had to be resourceful. We had to rely upon our own selves to survive and do the job, get it done, and get out of the bush at home at night.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like I think if you think about like as a society, just in general, every industry gets so much more specialized, and every position, every career gets like very specialized. You know what I mean? You spend less time doing a bunch of things and more times getting really, 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 really good at one thing. And that's the only way it seems like companies survive nowadays, right? Is to become specialized in certain areas. So, but yeah, no, I agree. There's a competency to being able to like take care of yourself that maybe is missed because of some of that. But I mean, I think those regulations are good. I mean, like towing, I mean, people die towing trucks and people
they get hurt.
So shit happens that like that. I think, there's a reason that those regulations are there. And I think, but yeah, I know what you mean.
And then the companies are getting bigger because they have to be on an economic scale on the world market for our commodities, wood products. So they're getting bigger. Mm-hmm. So as they get bigger, you have to pigeonhole jobs.
Yeah.
When I started with Zeeler in Slave Lake in '86, there was 4 or 5 of us did everything.
Yeah.
We did the planning, we did the harvesting, we did the silviculture, we did everything, all 4 or 5, and we did everything, right? Now we have 20-some people, and everybody has a pigeonhole.
Yeah.
And, sure, the idea for the company is, we'll cross-reference and we'll get, people who have exposed to everything, but it doesn't happen as much as if you are in a small company, which Zeeler was at the time.
Yeah.
And you get the chance to do everything, and you're expected to be able to do everything at any given time, and that's what happened, right? So you get way more well-rounded in your experience, and when you learn a lot more, and you get better exposure to different aspects of the business, right?
Yeah.
Not saying the good old days were good.
They were fun.
They were fun, and we got paid, and we did our job. We enjoyed our stuff, but like the new forestry, I'm always so impressed with the new young people coming out, the skills that they have.
You're welcome.
I'm his dad, and I taught him most everything he knows, which is scary,
including my arrogance.
But the young people coming out, like people asked me one time, who's like what's your mentors, right? And a lot of my mentors are young kids coming out. They have great skills, they have great ambition. I just don't think a lot of companies give them the opportunity to really express what they can do.
Yeah.
They end up getting pigeonholed, right? So,
that makes sense. No, I know exactly what you're saying because it's tough. I feel like people, because like you were saying, we need the efficiencies that we require to stay competitive, and then people get pigeonholed because they're good at that thing, and they don't want to. They say, I want to give you the opportunity to get good at these other things as well. But that time is training time and costs the company money, and they don't get that opportunity more often. But I think you're right. I think in the long run, if you had people you need the specialized people, but also the more understanding the operations forester has of the silvicultural side of it, or the opposite, or even the operations and the silviculture have for the mill portion of it, the more connectivity and the more savings and efficiencies you're going to have in the end, right? I think that gets missed out a lot.
Yeah.
I'm pretty specialized. Like I'm an inventory. I know how to do inventories, and that's basically all I know how to do right now. So I'm a perfect example of that, right?
Yeah, no, they get I think at times way too specialized, but they're really good at the skills they have.
Yeah.
And now with the technology we have, all of a sudden, if you asked me to lay out a cut block, in the old days, I could walk for miles and do it, lay them out.
But you're going to give me the chain and compass spiel?
Yes, it would be the chain and compass. It might, top of fill, whatever. But
for people,
I don't know if I could fire up a GPS and actually do it that way, right?
Yeah.
You lose those skills as you get stuck in the office, right?
Yeah.
But you're quite impressed. But I remember taking a young fellow out 4 or 5 years ago to look at a road, or to look at winter time to find a road.
Yeah.
And I said, well, put it in GPS, right? And let's go, right? So we had to cross a river and a beaver dam, and got the other side in 3 feet of snow. And I said, okay, get your GPS out. And it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I said, well, get your compass out. And I got this weird look. Like, what do you mean a compass? I said, so pulled out my compass. I says, let's go. Right?
Did he have a compass with him?
What?
Did he have a compass
with
him?
No, he didn't have a compass with him.
Yeah, see, that's a rookie mistake, though.
Yeah.
You should, regardless of what technology you have, you should have a compass on you at all times.
Because you can still do your work.
Well, not just you can still do your work, but you can at least find your way home if you need to. Like,
no, but my expectation is I send you out there to do your work.
Well, yeah, that too.
And you should be able to do your work without all the gadgetry.
Yeah, for sure.
Just use common sense.
Yeah.
And a compass, and so so a mix of old and new. There's nothing wrong with it, right?
Yeah. No, that's what I was wondering, is because like you see like the old guard, and I think this is always a result of just, I think every generation, when the new generation comes up, thinks that, like, not everybody, but you know what I mean? If you go back to Roman times, they even talk about saying the youngest generation is ruining it for everybody. There are all these new things, and they're lazy and entitled or whatever. And I think that's pretty common of just human nature, right? To fear that change. But personally, yeah, I think that I feel like things have taken a turn in the last like 20 years, from what I can tell, is that it's moving towards way more of a scientific perspective and much more specialized. But I think it's a good thing if we can allow people to branch out a little bit and see the full perspective.
Well, as you do your job say you're an inventory specialist, you get so focused on what you're seeing and doing and trying to put labels on it. But Mother Nature isn't very regular. Mm-hmm. And we try to regularize it, make it very regular, but it's hard to do.
Yeah.
And there's always, it's not just the odd one-off. There's a lot of one-offs out there.
Oh.
And you have to be able to recognize that on the spot. And that's the flexibility. That's where the bush experience gets in. And, they laid out this cut block on GPS. I should be able to go find it.
Yeah.
And you go, when you get out there, you said, this isn't going to happen. We can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to get a blend of both, right?
Yeah. No, it's a perfect example is like I'm doing inventory down in southern, like the eastern slopes or whatever, right? And I've never had to do inventories down there. So looking at ecosites down there, for people that don't know what ecosites are, it's just nutrient regime and moisture regime. But I'm looking at stuff and I have no idea what I'm looking at. And like we had to go down there and I had to go look and actually like, we didn't dig a pit, but basically did the equivalent of digging a soil pit to see what the hell's going on, because you don't know. And people might have assumed one thing and realistically it was something completely opposite. So no, I feel like you're right. There's tying in those perspectives, right? From like one side to the other. Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. Oh, I had a brain fart here.
Okay. No, I'll just talk. So I started planting these little trees, and I had a really good friend, was a forester in Alberta, Jim Kitts. I remember doing regen surveys with Jim, and this was in the late 70s, early 80s, and we had to find like 2-year-old spruce or a 3-year-old spruce to pass the regen survey.
Right, for a regeneration survey for in the cut block, post cut block.
Make sure we did our job right, or somebody had done their job right.
Make sure the trees are planted and they're there and they're growing.
Literally, we're scratching through 3 or 4 or 5 feet of grass trying to find these 2 little seedlings, which are about the size of a quarter, the height of a quarter.
Are these planted or were these?
No, they were natural seedlings.
Natural, okay.
Yeah. And you find them, and it's stock block. We did a good job, right?
Right.
And I know Jim and I, we both looked at it and said, like, these trees aren't going to live, right? It ain't going to work.
Oh, so I see. So on paper, it was sufficiently
on paper, everything
stocked.
looked good. Yeah, it was just the regulation at the time. They were better than anywhere else in the world, probably, but they hadn't really identified the science behind it yet. And then, like 10 years later, they found out that they did a bunch of juvenile stand surveys, and none of these blocks were stocked anymore.
Right.
And that's when the standards changed. And the government said, okay, this is wrong.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we had to improve the nursery standards, get better trees, planting stock, and then we had to improve our ability to keep them growing, right?
So when was this? What year?
Well, it started in 1990 when we had the free to grow standard came in, right?
Okay.
And in 95, all the quota holders, which were the smaller operators, they were forced to take their plantation to year 14.
Okay, so
before that, all they had to do was get it established, which was the 2-year-old spruce.
Right,
it's established. We're done. Right.
So basically, beforehand, when it was as soon as you could prove that there was trees there, even if they're only 2 centimeters tall, that counted as your obligation is over.
Yeah.
Whereas now the new standard is you have to make sure those trees are there and healthy till 14 years
to a certain height.
Certain height. At 14 years old, roughly.
Yeah.
And then, if that's true, then your obligation is done. Yeah. And if it's not true, then you have to go back in and replant.
Retreat, yeah. And so it became very obviously, in a quota holder, is that we were doing aerial seeding. We would do 2,000 hectares of ground in 4 days.
So you were seeding like spruce and
just
pine
spreading
and
seed
whatever?
with a helicopter, right? Spruce and pine, right? And we were very successful at it.
Yeah.
But we knew we couldn't meet that 30 centimeter height standard at year 14.
Right.
Where it's basically trying to get through the grass, right?
Yeah.
So then the obvious thing was you have to plant trees. So then around 1995, the province just exploded with planted trees.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we started planting bigger trees and better stock. The nurseries had to get better.
Yeah.
There's more rigorous standards on stocking standards, right?
Yeah.
And we started putting trees in the ground. And then the next step was, well, how do we make sure that they stay alive, right?
Yeah.
So then the province enabled the herbicide program,
Yeah.
right? And the herbicide program, on a lot of sites in the Boreal North, you can literally get 6 feet of calamagrostis, which is a grass,
Yeah.
6 feet high in 1 year. Well, imagine what a 30 centimeter or 50 centimeter tree is going to do underneath 100 centimeters or 200 centimeters of grass.
It barely survives if it does at all.
If it does at all. So the herbicide program came in, and all of a sudden, we were seeing fantastic results.
Yeah.
I mean, like super fantastic results.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when we put in 1,000 trees in a hectare, 1,000 trees a hectare were living.
Yeah.
And for year 14, some of them were 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
And 15 feet tall at year 14 is a lot different than 6 centimeters tall or 8 centimeters tall.
Oh, yeah.
On the old standard.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So that's where forestry has gone. And it has been driven by silviculture and the ability to grow trees.
Yeah.
And if you ask me my opinion now, I would say that we're really, really good at growing trees.
Well, if you talk to Vic Leifers, I had him on one of the podcasts, he would argue that he would argue that we are too good at it, right? That we're starting to grow these young stands that like don't even exist in nature because they're growing so well, right? It's
They're
so
managed
productive.
stands, right?
Yeah. But
especially the pine is not so bad because the pine, it comes back after a fire event and it's usually dense, like hair on a dog's back anyway.
Yeah.
So our biggest job is to thin it out.
Yeah.
But on the spruce, which is a successional species, and it grows very well with the aspen, right? And then we have to figure out the plan on how to get both the aspen and the spruce on.
Yeah.
And the planting is the only way with herbicide to really ensure, in my mind, that the spruce is going to be there.
Yeah.
And I've always said if you manage for the spruce, the aspen really will take care of itself.
Yeah.
Then you just got to have the metrics like you do to be able to determine what the mix is.
Yeah.
And what each piece of ground is contributing to somebody's allowable cut.
Yeah.
Right? But my gist of it is that as the silviculture improved, it allowed us and maybe forced us to do better forest management.
Yeah.
In Alberta, we've always said that our allowable cut is based on what we can grow. Mm-hmm. And we were using some of the old standards for what we can grow, and we weren't actually growing them that fast.
Oh, really?
Right?
Okay.
So now, through a group of companies and some really smart scientists from the Alberta government, we came up with the regeneration standard.
Yeah.
And that was a huge boon to forest management too, because now we have a standard where we're actually measuring what we can grow.
Yeah. Which is
what the rules are. You can only cut what you can grow.
Well, not just the rules, but it's ethical and it's moral and it makes for nice forests.
Yeah. So from 1977, when I was planting these silly little trees in the ground, and surprisingly, a lot of them lived because spruce is a really tough species, right? But to now, at year 14, we got 16-foot high trees.
Yeah,
that's a huge evolution in silviculture, but it's also a huge evolution in forest management.
Yeah.
Because now I can go out and I can measure these trees. I can tell you how much I'm growing a year exactly, or as good as our numbers are.
Yeah.
And be very close at making sure that I'm not overcutting.
Yeah.
I have a properly managed forest. What goes in is what we take out, right?
Yeah.
And I have lots of people ask me, are we going to have enough trees? And I say, yes, we're going to have enough trees as long as we keep getting better data and knowing exactly what we can grow.
Yeah.
And if we only cut what we can grow,
yeah,
we're always going to have trees.
Oh, yeah. And that's part of the law. We have to prove that that's what's going on all the time. So yeah, we know we should be good.
And it's part of the it's part of the regulation, and that's what the Alberta government is for, is to ensure that the companies are following those rules, right? And in the most part, almost unequivocally, the companies want to do that as well because it's in their best interest.
Yeah. Well, economically as well, it's in their best interest. In every aspect, it's in their best interest, except for short-term financial.
Yeah, there's not too many industries other than farming and forestry in this province that are long-term investments.
Yeah.
In farming, you buy 12 quarters of land. That's a long-term investment. It takes a long time to pay it off. In forestry, you don't buy the land. You get the right to harvest, say, 700,000 hectares.
Yeah.
But if you want to be here in 40 years, you have to manage every year properly along the way.
Yeah.
And almost unequivocally, everybody at Alberta, the big companies, their goal is to be here 200 years from now.
Yeah.
Like in forestry, we have a 200-year planning horizon.
Yeah.
There's nobody out there that plans 200 years.
No, it's insane.
Well, and altruistic, if you think about it, really, is that realistic? Well, it's the best snapshot we have now.
Yeah.
Like, we know 50 years from now we're not going to be doing what we're doing now.
Right. Well, it's always changing. Like
it's changing, right?
Every year there's new research. There's mountains of new research coming out every year and just changing policy and changing the way we harvest and everything. Yeah.
But we always look at the 200-year horizon. And, in Alberta, we have to do a forest management plan basically every 10 years.
Yeah.
So that horizon is always being stretched out.
Yeah.
But we're always adjusting at the forest management planning stage. Yeah. So when people ask me, are we going to have trees? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless we have some catastrophic disaster, and we've had some, like the mountain pine beetle could have been, or still could be, a catastrophic disaster.
Yeah.
Or we have massive amounts of climate change where, like trees just won't grow anymore, and we got to go to grass and grain, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't think will happen in our near future. But those are the only things that could really affect whether we can have forests.
Yeah.
And even if let's say climate change does come in, we'll just have different forests.
It'll be different. That's I think that's the part that people are scared of, right? Is like you'll have entire natural subregions moving like upward in elevation, and you'll have, you know what I mean? Like people are afraid you'll lose certain specific areas that were maybe very unique.
And you will, but
that's part of the natural.
In my experience, the forest is extremely resilient. You can burn it, you can beat it up, you can do whatever you want to it, and it comes back.
Yep.
It may come back with different species, and smart people in the field of forestry will figure out what to do with those species.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
When I started in the province, aspen was a weed. It was something you killed and got rid of.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of people, a lot of livelihoods created by harvesting and marketing a product out of aspen.
Isn't that amazing? That blew my mind. I never even thought about that in school until I think it was second year university, and they were talking about how, up until like the 90s, aspen was considered just a pain in the ass. Like it wasn't even something that people considered to be merchantable. And then all of a sudden you realize it's the fastest growing tree we have, and it's perfectly good for any number of things, right? So that must have been a huge change for the whole forest industry as a whole. Yeah,
it was around 1990 when most of the aspen was allocated and given out.
Yeah.
Before that, it was a weed. How do we get rid of it? How do we control it? How do we knock it back? It was
just spruce and pine you were managing for then, basically.
It was conifer, right?
Yeah,
basically conifer operations, right? But the aspen, there was some aspen operations in Slave Lake. There was a lumber mill that made aspen 2x4s in Slave Lake in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was called North American Lumber or North American Stud or something like it was. And the problem with aspen lumber is that it's hard to control the drying process. So it warps really bad.
Oh.
And anyway, you don't get perfect boards because the aspen has a lot of heart rot and that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so it went out of business in a couple of years, right? But the company I started working for, Ziegler, in the 70s, we actually made, it was actually not aspen, it was balsam poplar, but the company specialized in plywood, but it made balsam poplar plywood.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, like
all
the hills around our house, they were all logged for balsam poplar.
Well, yeah, the poplar grows like crazy there. Yeah. It's insane.
But it was all hauled in 8-foot bolts to the railhead, which was on the lake, and it was all shipped to Edmonton, right downtown Edmonton, where the plant is now. and they peeled it there.
How did they peel it, though? Because poplar is notoriously rotten in the middle, right?
Yeah, and that was the issue with poplar, because you could only recover about 30% of the wood you sent in because it's notorious for being rotten in the middle.
Yeah.
But the stuff, the plywood and the veneer you got off of balsam poplar was absolutely gorgeous. It was pure white.
Well, how did you rotate it to peel the veneer?
You chuck it out. You make sure you had a sound core in it, right? So the younger stuff, the smaller wood, or the sounder stuff, we could peel, and they made beautiful plywood. It was absolutely gorgeous plywood.
I didn't know that.
But and rumor has it that even during World War II, the birch behind our house in Slave Lake, which was big, like some of it's 3 feet in diameter.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. They actually logged that, and they peeled it, and they made plywood, birch plywood.
We have birch plywood downstairs here, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
But the birch plywood was what was used to construct the mosquito bombers for England in World War II. And the mosquito bombers were the ones that torpedo bombed on the ocean, and they flew right close to the level of the ocean. Yeah. And they very often got wiped out, but they wanted something that would float. And the bombers, when they hit the water, they could land and float. And they were light. Birch was very strong plywood and very light.
So what nation were those planes from? That was from Canada?
It was British and American, right?
British and American, but it was
a lot of it came from birch from Slave Lake.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's wild.
Rumor has it. But I've heard this story several times, and it makes sense. You've been in our backyard. You walked in the back. There's 15, 20, or like we'll say 30 to 50 centimeter birch back there, solid and sound.
Yeah, about 100 years old, so it's growing
and would
really well.
Peel nice and make beautiful plywood, right? Huh. Anyway, so there's a lot of diversity there in the Slave Lake area. Yeah. But those are some of the things that, I don't know where we were.
I don't know. That's the point of a podcast, is you have a conversation and see where it goes. It doesn't really matter. But well, what do you think? We can finish it off here. We're already rolling on 35 minutes. But as far as the future for forestry, as far as where do you think it's going scientifically, or maybe from a person perspective or management perspective? You've had 35 years of experience.
Yeah, the forest industry, in the next few years and longer, in the shorter term, even that, is going to experience a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
we have a lot of environmental groups and even the indigenous groups and things like caribou and issues that are going to affect the available land base to produce trees.
Right.
I don't think it's going to destroy forestry, because some really smart people can do a lot of good things, right? So there's opportunity to always be forestry, and I think as a society in North America, we would be negligent if we didn't promote forestry.
Oh yeah.
In as one of our main businesses, we have, I know in Alberta and in all of Canada, we have some of the best managed forests in the world. And they are green, they are renewable, and they are sustainable.
Yeah.
And for us to use a metal 2x4 instead of a wooden one, or to use any other product that is non-renewable versus a wood product, we'd be negligent as a society.
Oh, I think it would be a downfall of our society. We'd see so much, just the increase in mining, the increase in non-sustainable activities would blow through the roof if you didn't use wood. I know a lot of people look towards one of the big pushes. People are saying we should use hemp to build all our houses. And the problem there is a nitrogen problem, right? You're dealing with fertilizer.
Well, it's more than a nitrogen problem. Is that you've taken a piece of ground that had lots of biodiversity on it, and you killed all the biodiversity, and now you're growing one species.
Yeah,
this is basically farmers' fields that we're talking about here.
And right? We need farmers' fields to support society, but we don't need more of them.
We don't need more of them to do something that Mother Nature and the forest does naturally.
And sustainably.
Yeah. And with very little effort, we can have a renewable building product. It's like when we were just in Maui, they don't have plastic bags.
Yeah.
Everything's paper bags.
Yeah.
And for some reason in Canada, we've gone to this plastic bag, fill up our landfills, they blow everywhere syndrome. And paper is renewable. As long as it comes from a proven sustainable forest, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? And if a paper bag falls on the ground, in less than a year's time, it disappears.
Yeah. Well, now you hit on something right on the head there too. It's exactly what you said. If we don't maintain forestry in North America and other countries like it that have sustainable forest management, then it's not like we're going to stop using wood. We're still going to use wood. We're just going to take it from countries that don't have those standards, and you're going to be getting stuff that is deforestation, right? And stuff like that, which is, so you're supporting the exact opposite of what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah. We're not going to stop using paper, and we should be using more paper and more wood products because it is renewable.
Yeah. To replace currently
if all of a sudden we stop doing forestry in Canada, we're going to have to get that from somewhere else, and it will be from a place that doesn't have the rigorous standards we have and the concern for global warming and everything else that we have in place. So we would be totally irresponsible as a society if we did away with forestry.
Oh yeah, no, I agree completely. We're both pretty biased, but
it would be our Armageddon almost. It would be like saying goodbye to the world, because it's necessary that we have good managed sustainable forests in Canada, and we should be using those forest products.
Yeah,
and I saw pictures about trying to clean up the oceans and plastic. Well, if you got rid of plastic, there would be a lot of companies that wouldn't like us, but it would take away a lot of that issue.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there are issues with paper made from trees, right? There's huge power or huge water, but if you build it, they will come, right? So if you need it, society and really smart people will make it better.
Yeah.
In the old days, all we had was kraft pulp, and we wasted lots of chemicals. Now we have CTMP, which is chemi-thermomechanical pulping, which uses more power, but it recovers 95% of the fiber. Right. So we can get better at what we want to do. Right.
Well, it's constantly getting more efficient, more effective, and just getting better. And I think you're right. It's a constantly moving industry. We're not set where we are. I think we're great. Like, we're the world standards right now. We're right on top of them, and it's only going to improve from there, right? So
but having said that, so we plan out 200 years, but realistically, in 50 years, we may not be making 2x6s and 2x8s and 2x10s anymore.
Yeah,
we may be taking all that material, all woody fiber, grinding it up, and putting it into a form, just like those plastic deck boards you get.
Yeah,
right. You may be doing more of that,
bringing it down to its basic building blocks.
Yeah. So it's going to change.
Yeah.
It's going to change. But we have a bunch of people out there who are called professional forest technicians that understand that it can change.
Yeah.
And they're smart. They're young. They're going to make it change. They're going to make good changes. And forestry will be here.
Yeah.
It better be here.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm just starting my career, so.
But it should be here. And, people out there should just enjoy it while they got a chance, right?
Yeah.
And get out there and enjoy the woods. Not in my backyard is a terrible thing that happened, is that, you can do all the forestry, but you can't do it in my backyard.
Yeah.
And we have to get over the fact that it looks ugly for the first 5 years.
Yeah.
Because, yes, it does. It looks ugly, but what I see there is a new forest. Not an old one.
Right? Instead of seeing old trees, now you're going to start seeing all of the browsers and all the animals come back in. You'll start seeing rabbits and deer and moose pulling back in that you wouldn't have seen in that thick forest. And then eventually it comes back up. And I think people, they have this idea of, we want the old growth forest, right? We want everyone thinks old growth forest. You don't understand that the old growth forest is only supposed to be a small percentage of it. You need an even distribution of all age classes in order for it to work.
So as a forest management planner, my job was to ensure that we had a proper forest management plan, and the new standards ensure that we have all ages and types of forest going into the future.
Yeah.
So we're not just saying that, we'll have trees again.
Yeah.
It's going to be, we look at the types and ages of forest as well.
Yeah.
And you're right. In places like some of the parks where they wanted old growth all the time.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Jasper and Banff, all of a sudden, there's no grazers.
Yeah.
The elk are disappearing. Everything changes, right? So if you keep putting out fire, then there's no chance for it to change. So you have a bunch of old dead trees.
Yeah.
And nothing wants to live in it.
Yeah.
There are species that
specialized
in the old growth forest, but there are not that many of them.
They're owls and rodents and
termites and woodpeckers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's not a lot because
pine martens and stuff like that.
So if you walk into an old growth forest and you see and look at the understory, and there's not much there. There's not that much there to eat, right? There's not much there for things to carry out their life cycle in.
But it looks beautiful, right? It looks you got all these snags, you've got young stuff and you've got old stuff and you've got, it looks ideal, right? But it's not necessarily.
It's not. So if you cut it and come back 5 years later, all of a sudden you see this myriad of wildlife and things happening in that forest that weren't there before. So I've been doing school tours for 20 or 30 years now, and I like to show the students that this is a cut block, this is a burn, this is a 50-year-old cut block.
Yeah.
And it's just Mother Nature cycling through the whole system.
Yeah.
And if you had everything of all one of those, it wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
But in forest management, we want to make sure we have a bit of everything on the landscape and planned out ahead of 200 years.
Yeah.
So we always have a space for all species, and that's part of biodiversity management.
Yeah,
right?
and that's what we do now.
Yeah, that's what forestry is now. Is biodiversity management.
Yeah, it went from a crop management to a biodiversity and sustainable system management.
So if we go to hemp,
yeah,
we're into crop management.
Yeah,
one species to get a product.
Yeah,
in forestry, we have one or two primary species that we want to get the product, but it's enabling all the other species to exist.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing about forestry now.
Yeah.
And in the old days, it wasn't quite that way.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it's evolved to where I believe we'll always have good forestry and we'll always have forests. And it is truly a renewable and sustainable resource.
Yeah.
So
as long as we convince the public that is the truth and they can see the science for themselves, right?
And we don't want to whitewash the public. We don't want to give them a snow job on
tell them the truth. Tell them
the truth. And as science progresses, we get better data, we get better information, and you're part of it. Your job is part of getting better information. And the better information we have, the better decisions we can make to meet our end goal, which is a sustainable forest.
Yeah. But you're right, though. You don't want people to you don't want people only to show them the good side of it. You want to show them, look at this, here's something we screwed up maybe, and these are the steps we're taking to fix it, because we understand that this is done on a huge scale. So there's always going to be issues. There's always going to be a creek that maybe didn't get crossed the way it was supposed to be. There's always going to be like maybe you accidentally knocked down an eagle's nest that was supposed to be buffered, but nobody noticed it until too late. Like that kind of shit's going to happen. But we understand that we're getting better at that, and that with time, if we're honest with the public, I think they'll come to realize that we're open and honest, and we're not trying to hide anything. There's no conspiracy theory there, right?
Yeah, and we still need watchdogs. We still need people who out there are asking the question, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you get very laid back and you just don't think about it anymore.
You're complacent, really.
Yeah, you get very complacent in your job, right? So when people are asking those pertinent questions at the right point in time, you go, oh yeah, let's do that.
Keeps you thinking.
And right now, the Aboriginal community is asking those questions, and we see a lot of that. That's grown a lot, where they're saying, "Well, how are you affecting our traditional life, our traditional use of the forest?"
Yeah.
So now the companies are going out with the Aboriginal groups and getting that information. And as we build more and more data banks of good information, it's just going to get better.
Yeah.
There will be a real high pressure on the amount of land we can do forestry on, right?
Yeah, I think it'll decrease over time.
It'll decrease over time because people are increasing over time. If you want that effect to go away, take everybody in Alberta, move them back to Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and the forest will be perfectly fine. They will do well, I guarantee it. Yeah, but you won't get to go to Jasper and Banff. You won't get to go fishing in Slave Lake, right? But as we get more and more people, it's going to have more and more pressure on those resources.
Yeah,
that just means we have to have better informed and better enabled foresters. To make those proper decisions.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. That's perfect.
And part of our goal is to educate the young and get more people involved in forestry that have that same desire.
Yeah,
and forestry is not a dead industry. It's very much a live industry,
Yeah.
and it's going to be one of the premier industries that Alberta has after the oil sands are depleted, or we can't get a pipeline across to BC or whatever, right? You know, forestry is the mainstay in all the communities where I've lived and worked. When the oil patch goes down, it's always forestry that holds up the economy, and keeps the town going. Yeah, and we have a lot of towns in
Alberta. It's consistent. It's not a boom and bust industry.
Not a boom and bust industry. We're there for the long haul.
Yeah,
we're there for long term, and we're going to be there. Well, they'll be there. I'm retired. I don't have to worry about it, but I could be a watchdog now.
No, that's exactly. Yeah, I wanted to ask you one more thing though, Dick. Do you have any specific advice or anything you want to give to people maybe trying to get into it, or I don't know. I was thinking more along the lines of is there advice with people that trying to move forward in their career, how they should deal with their managers, or how they should just general advice about getting into it.
Well, I think you get into forestry anyway. Just be excited about forest, about being outside. Mm-hmm. I know two of my kids who are in forestry, they all fought going into forestry. I don't want to do that because mom and dad did that. But the bottom line is that, what do you want to do? Well, I'd like to work outside. Oh, well, you have a choice.
Yeah.
There's not too many choices. And forestry is one of those great things where you can spend a lot of time outdoors if you so wish, right?
Yeah.
And anybody who's interested in being outside and doing stuff and getting a good job in forestry, I would encourage them to go into the forestry program, right? Mm-hmm. Because the forestry program at U of A or at NAIT or these places, they focus on giving you jobs in the forest. And I don't know of any student out there who hasn't got a good summer job in forestry.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the other branches, you may not get. If you're a biologist or that, you got to scramble, right? Some of the other scientists, even the natural sciences, you got to scramble to get a job. But in forestry, there's never any problem getting a summer job and getting good employment and
at least I haven't seen it. I haven't seen people have problems with it, but not to say it might happen. Some people might have trouble, but if you have trouble getting a summer job, it's because you're not willing to move to a different town somewhere or something.
And that's the one thing. If you're in forestry, you got to go to the forest.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to see a tree now and then, right? So if you're a Starbucks person and you got to have Starbucks, you may not want to go into forestry, right?
Might not be for you.
Yeah, but
that being said, though, as time goes on, we're spending more and more time in the office, right? That's where the decisions are made. That's where the conversations are being had, and I find the field work that's being done is more just a calibration thing and an enjoyment thing more than anything else. And then it seems like it. You know what I mean?
Well, a lot of work is being done in the office. There's technology, but if you want to be a good forester, you got to get on the ground and you got to see it. You got to kick the dirt. You got to knock on the wood. You got to really see for yourself. Mm-hmm. And because the forest is so diverse, nothing's ever standard
and dynamic.
There's no standard out there. So what you see on paper 10 years later could be totally different.
Big time.
So you really got to go out and look at it, and you do well at it. You got to understand. And you got to be able to sort of read between the lines of how and understand how Mother Nature is trying to make this whole thing work, right?
Models only tell you so much. You got to get out there and see the connection.
And models, we have lots of models, and we always say of models, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you have garbage data going in, it's going to be a mess coming out.
Is that what you say? I feel like you use a different word.
Oh, no. That's enough. But garbage in, garbage out. And but we're getting a lot better data. Stuff done here at Greenlink, the inventory data is just phenomenal, where you could measure a pen laying on the ground, basically.
With remote sensing,
Yeah, so you go it's the first time in history we've got inventories where we know exactly what's out there. Mm-hmm. We know all the big trees, the little trees, the in-betweens, the species, the size, the age.
The moisture, the nutrient regime, the aspect, everything.
One of the things I think in forestry is that's going to change, especially in the boreal, is we're going to go from a monoculture type forestry where you cut pine, you put back pine.
Yeah.
Well, pine's not a great example because pine will come back straight pine.
Yeah.
But when you cut spruce, you put back spruce.
Yeah.
Well, really, what we should be doing is going to be a mixture. It's going to be every cut block is going to have a magic formula. and you're going to put back so much alder, so much willow, so much aspen, so much bam, so much birch, so much spruce, and maybe some pine, and you're going to have these magic formulas.
Yeah.
The challenge will be for the modelers to learn how to model this mosaic.
Oh, yeah.
So what I'm talking about is in Alberta, we've practiced even age forestry, one age, and we take that piece of land and we grow it like a crop through 60, 80, 100 years.
Yeah.
What I'm speaking about in the Boreal, where we have lots of mixed woods, we're going to have to get a handle upon doing uneven age forestry.
Yeah.
How do we grow multi-age, multi-species stands and harvest them and reap off the benefits of it throughout a whole rotation, maybe 200
Let's explain
years.
that real, just like the multi-age. So instead of doing a clear cut, you're doing selective. You're selectively harvesting pieces of it.
Yeah, but it's actually not what you call selective harvesting, where you say you go in and take out 3 trees. I think you have to selectively manage the land base so that you have multiple species on that land.
Right.
So say aspen, balsam, poplar, and spruce and pine. They're all on that same land.
Yeah.
But they all grow differently. They all get mature at different ages, right? Yeah. And the spruce likes to come in underneath the aspen canopy and does well.
Yeah.
So how do you manage the understory spruce? And use that to your advantage and harvest the overstory aspen. And then as the understory spruce grows up, it's going to get different species in. So how do you manage that mosaic where you don't just go into the land base one time every 100 years?
Yeah.
You may go into it 5 times in 100 years.
Right.
And reap the benefits of all that extra growth.
Yeah. It may have less impact that way.
Well, as the land base shrinks because of increasing pressures from other uses, whether it's oil and gas or species at risk, we're going to need as an industry to get better at getting more off what we have.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, farmers do it by applying chemicals and herbicides and a bunch of other stuff to the land. I think foresters have this massive opportunity to properly manage the mixed wood part of it.
Yeah.
And grow multiple species, multiple ages of species. So you can have spruce and aspen and maybe some pine and some balsam poplar all on the land at one time and go in there and start managing it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. And it's not going to be so much at an individual cut block level. Yeah. It may be at a landscape level. Because at a cut block level, constant access creates issues for species. So when we have 100% access all the time, it ends up doesn't be natural. All the species that are hunted and preyed upon, they end up getting hammered, right?
Yeah.
So we want to not be there all the time.
Yeah.
We want to be there more.
It's an interesting approach. I've never even thought about that way of doing things. But yeah, it would be interesting to see how that develops in the next 20 years, right?
It's developing now.
Yeah.
It's developing now because we realize, especially in the mixed wood, we have spruce that comes up underneath the aspen, and we have 2 tenures. The government has given someone exclusive use of the aspen and someone exclusive use of the spruce, and the tenures aren't mixed, so we always have this infighting. But as we start managing the land on a holistic basis, we start saying, well, we can do this here and there and here, and take advantage of what Mother Nature has given you, which is the understory growth.
Yeah.
And start developing that concept and those models to verify that, okay, this will give us X number of wood and I know that you'll get more product off of a single unit of land by managing multiple species than if you just manage for one species.
How do you know that?
The numbers have shown that.
Because you've done it your entire life?
I've did it my entire life. But the RSA surveys still that.
Yeah.
The RSA surveys, which are Regenerated Standard of Alberta, if you go into a pure spruce stand and you try to make a pure spruce stand, we can do that. Put enough chemicals and brushing out there, we can make a pure spruce stand.
Yeah.
You get less volume per hectare.
Yeah.
Than if you grow aspen and spruce together.
Yeah. And that's how they naturally grow. So
that's the way they naturally grow.
Yeah.
So the numbers are showing that. The numbers that we're collecting for the government show that you can do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's figure out how to do it.
I'm excited to see where it ends up in the end here for sure.
Well, there's lots of smart people out there that can model it, and it'll get there. It'll get there.
So you thought you were worried about this? We're almost coming up on an hour here. We got to shut this thing down before people get bored.
We can shut it down anytime. I'm retired. I got lots to do.
But yeah, this worked out awesome. I think. Yeah, the things. Honestly, the things that you had to say were right on the money. Like that's the type of stuff that I was hoping you'd talk about. Just your experience. So you got 35 years of, or roughly 35 years of forestry experience, and you know, I think you really understand what's going on. So.
Yeah, and you know, my experience is limited to mostly to the Boreal, right? And some of the foothills in the Boreal. So I think in other areas of the province, there's people with better experience. Like when you get down into subalpine and that, it's a totally different experience.
What do you mean? You don't know everything?
No.
Contrary to what Mom might say, you think?
You're gonna edit all this crap out, aren't you? Right? I'll start swearing here, and you've got to get rid of it. Then
do whatever I want. We'll see.
No, I have the right to say no.
Anyways, we'll end it there. But anyways, I appreciate you coming on. This is awesome. I know it was you're kind of hesitant to do it, but it worked out really good, I think.
Well, we'll see.
All right.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. Hope you guys liked that. And if you got any questions for myself or my dad, just shoot me an email, yourforestpodcast@gmail.com. Happy to get them. Really like receiving the emails. Yeah, it just tells me that you guys are listening, you're engaged, and you like what's coming out. So I like to hear it. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. I think I'm on Twitter too. Kind of suck at Twitter, but whatever. And if you guys are on iTunes, if you could please rate and review and leave a comment if you want, that would help me out a lot. You guys have no idea how much it helps me out. That's where most of the traffic comes from, it seems like. But yeah, appreciate the help, guys. And we'll see you soon with another episode. Take it easy.